Welcome everyone to the Developer's Guide to Troubleshooting Microsoft Cloud for Sustainability. I'm Stephen Pride, your speaker for this session. I'm a Principal Solution Architect on our Customer and Partner Success team, and have been at Microsoft for a few years now. Prior to that, I spent a little over a decade in the Partner Channel developing solutions and implementing Power Platform for customers, and was even a Power Platform customer myself. Today, we will start by setting the scenario for this session. After that, we will walk through data ingestion issues, calculation complications, discuss best practices, suggest some helpful tools and resources, and finally, wrap up with Q&A. All right, let's get started. Today, we will walk through a variety of scenarios that have occurred during the Contoso Coffee Scope 3 Category 1 emission implementation, and learn what steps Contoso and their partners should take to troubleshoot the issues that have occurred. Let's start by discussing the data ingestion issues that Contoso Coffee has been experiencing.
Here on the data import page, it appears that Contoso Coffee had an error when importing their 2023 Brazilian coffee purchase data. On this page, we can click on the connection name to be brought to the latest connection refresh attempt. After the connection page loads, we are presented with validation metrics near the center of the screen. It appears that there were 11 source records and 11 records failed. Additionally, the validation type list informs us that there were 11 failures in the missing lookup values validation. We can click on the number in the failures column to be presented with a list of errors filtered by the validation type. Additionally, the View Errors button in the upper right of the page will list all errors for the data import. In this scenario, the error message column states that there is an invalid value for the spend type attribute. Scrolling to the right, we can find the spend type attribute column with a value of coffee beans. To resolve this error, we will need to navigate back to MSM and add coffee beans to the spend type reference data. In addition to the View Errors button, you can also download an error report in Excel format. You can look up details for this and other data import errors on our documentation page. The Resolve Error Messages documentation page lists error codes, error messages, causes, and resolutions for more than 45 types of data import errors. Returning to MSM, to resolve our data import error, we will select reference data from the navigation panel on the left. Scroll down to Spend Type and select View. Select New on the command bar to create a new spend type record. We will enter coffee beans as the name and select one purchased goods and services as the emission source. Next, we will click Save and close to save the new coffee beans spend type record. Let's attempt to import the 2023 Brazilian coffee purchase data again. Select Imports from the navigation panel. Select the Scope 3 Category 1 connection and click Import on the command bar. After a few minutes, we will see that the data is successfully imported. Utilizing the connection validation metrics, found by selecting the connection name on a data import row, can be an important tool in identifying data import issues.
We have a few key takeaways from that demo. Review the connection validation metrics by clicking on the connection name. Use the Excel error report or view error screen to get more details on any errors that occurred. Check for the error codes on the MS Docs site. Links will be shared at the end of this session. And a common mistake is missing reference data, so be sure to double check our reference data before we import our data. Next, we will discuss the calculation complications that have occurred at Contoso Coffee.
Here in MSM, the Contoso purchased coffee beans calculation profile has completed with errors. We can troubleshoot these errors by selecting the calculation profile and clicking the Show History button on the command bar. All calculation jobs related to the calculation profile are displayed. We will click on the most recent record, based on the finished at date and time. This record also has a status of completed with errors. Hovering over the error message fields, we can see the spend-based calculation action node had an error related to a missing or incorrect factor mapping. Let's open the calculation, also known as the calculation model, and the source record in new tabs. Selecting the spend-based calculation action node, we can see the emission factor library being used, Contoso custom emission library, and the emission factor, spend type. Spend type is a factor mapping referencing the spend type field on the purchased goods and services activity data table. Switching to the source record, we can review the value set in the spend type field. We see here that the spend type is set to coffee beans. Let's look at the emission factors and factor mappings for the factor library used in our calculation model. Select factor libraries from the navigation panel. Contoso Custom Emission Library is the factor library used in our calculation model. While reviewing our emission factors, we see a Brazilian Arabica coffee bean emission factor that should be mapped to our coffee bean spend type. It appears factor mappings have not been created for this factor library. We will click New Factor Mapping to configure a mapping from the coffee beans spend type to the Brazilian Arabica coffee beans emission factor. Please note, the first name field is free text and will not impact the functionality of the factor mapping. We now have a factor mapping configured for the calculation model to use. It is a best practice to review your factor mappings before you run your calculations to ensure you have factor mappings in place for the respective reference data. After returning to the calculations job page, we will click the Retry Job button on the upper right of the calculation errors grid. We can then wait until the calculation finishes, or click on the calculation job in the Retried Jobs grid to monitor the calculation job directly. This scenario focused on a factor mapping issue, however other calculation issues may occur. The steps outlined here are a starting point for troubleshooting your calculation issues. Utilizing the Show History button, the error message, calculation, and source fields will enable you to identify the root cause of your error. And the Retry Job button will allow you to retry only the failed calculations for the current calculation job, improving efficiency in calculating your emissions. We can see our calculation has now completed successfully.
Microsoft Cloud for Sustainability monitors for more than 20 different types of calculation errors to help improve your troubleshooting experience. Let's talk about a few that you may come across during your implementations, such as missing or incorrect factor mapping. This could occur, like in our scenario, if you do not have a factor mapping for a piece of reference data used in your activity data and calculation model. Be sure to check your model for the factor mapping field used and your activity data to see what data is in that field. Check that your factor mappings are configured to use emission factors from the same factor library used in your calculation model. And add any missing factor mappings for reference data you may not have mappings for. As you build calculation models for your unique business needs, you may run across a quantity or quantity unit error. This could occur if the values chosen for quantity and quantity unit in your calculation model are missing, or for security reasons inaccessible to the calculation model. Check which fields or values you specified in the quantity and quantity unit fields for the action nodes specified in the error message. If the fields or values look correct, check your activity data to ensure values are populated for the fields specified in the calculation model. And finally, check for any customizations or field level security that may have been applied to the fields specified in the calculation model. Occasionally, you may experience a situation where the calculated emission or activity quantity exceeds the field limits of 100 billion. This can occur when the emission factor quantity unit or the greenhouse gas units are set to a unit that is too small for the quantity being calculated. Check the emission factor being used in your calculation model to ensure it is the correct one. If possible, consider using smaller chunks of data such as monthly instead of quarterly. You may need to create and use a new unit with a higher conversion factor, such as megaton instead of metric ton. And when using our product carbon footprint functionality in calculations, you may experience product footprint missing errors. This can occur when an activity record is missing a reference to the product footprint, or the product footprint is missing a value in the specified field. Check the emission factor being used in your calculation model to ensure it is the correct one. Double check that the activity records have product carbon footprint references, and check the reference product carbon footprint record to ensure its fields contain values. Here are some key takeaways. We should use the Show History button to see our calculation job history and investigate any issues. We should export our calculation errors to Excel to gain further insight into what went wrong. We should utilize the Retry Job button to rerun calculations for only the failed activity records. And be sure to check our factor mappings and units to ensure they are configured prior to running our calculation. Let's discuss a few essential best practices from what we have learned so far. Reference data is a foundational element of the cloud for sustainability. It is important to spend some extra time checking you have all of the reference data you need. If you are using factor mappings in a calculation model, double check that you have factor mapping set up correctly and compare against the activity data you will be calculating emissions for. Check the quantity fields used in your calculation models to ensure they are populated with appropriate data. Use the Retry Job button on your calculation jobs to rerun calculations for only the activities that failed, reducing the time required to calculate those emissions. Alright, let's discuss a few tools and resources that our team has used to assist customers during their implementations. Using the View Errors button on the data connection record, as well as clicking on the number of errors for a validation, are critical tools in helping troubleshoot data ingestion issues. Additionally, check the Resolve Data Import Error Messages page on the MS Docs site. The Retry Job button will save time in rerunning any failed calculations you may have corrected. And finally, we often use and share the MS Docs pages, the well-architected for industry content and its associated assessment tool, as well as the MS Learn training content. Each month, we update our What's New page to include the latest release notes and deprecations. Be sure to check aka.ms/MCFS What's New for the latest updates. You can also deep dive into our data model by downloading the latest copy from aka.ms/MCFS data model. So, what should you do when you need additional support? Let's take a moment to walk through the process of creating a support ticket. This will connect you with a support expert at Microsoft to help you further troubleshoot and resolve your issue.
Navigate to Microsoft Solutions Center at solutions.microsoft.com. Select Support from the navigation section on the left to start a new support ticket. Select Microsoft Cloud for Sustainability from the product list and choose the solution area you are having trouble with. In this demonstration, we will choose General as the solution area. Click Next. Briefly describe the issue that you're experiencing, or select an option from the suggested list. For this demonstration, we will use the suggested option, Calculation in Microsoft for Sustainability, and click the button to search. Select your problem type from the list. In this demonstration, we will choose data calculations to match the brief description we entered previously. Click Get Solutions and review the list of suggested solutions. The suggested solutions provide links to our documentation related to the description previously entered. If the suggested solutions do not resolve your issue, click the Next button to continue creating a support case. Choose your support plan from the list. This list may include standard support, your unified contract, or other support contracts. Enter the details about your issue into the support request form that appears. Providing accurate and clear details of the issue, as well as when the issue started, will help you reach a resolution faster. Choose an appropriate severity and include any additional attachments that may be helpful. When you are finished, click Next. Populate your contact information, including your country, email address, phone number, and the best way to contact you. You can include additional email addresses that you would like to have included on communications as well. Click Submit to create your support ticket. You will receive a confirmation box once your support ticket has been submitted. Clicking the link in the confirmation box will take you to the Help and Support section of the Power Platform Admin Center. Here, you can track the status of your support ticket.
Let's recap the support ticket process. Make sure you have the necessary security roles such as environment or system administrator, or one of the many other roles listed at aka.ms/mcfs support roles. Navigate to solutions.microsoft.com and select Support. Choose the appropriate product and solution area for the issue you are having. Describe the issue and review the list of potential solutions. Select your support plan and add your contact information. Click Submit and a support representative will reach out to you shortly. Be sure to review our support process documentation at aka.ms/mcfs support doc. Let's review the key takeaways from this session. We should review the connection validation metrics by clicking on the connection name. We should utilize the Retry Job button to rerun calculations for only the failed activity records after we have resolved the errors. Be sure to check the What's New page each month to learn about new features and any deprecations. And finally, the Support Wizard in Microsoft Solution Center is where you should go if you need any additional support. Thank you for joining us on this troubleshooting journey. I hope you all were able to learn a few new tips and tricks along the way. Please share your feedback on this and other sessions. And be sure to check out our Cloud for Sustainability documentation, join our sustainability community to continue this conversation, and take a look at our learning resources.